On this episode of In the Gun, we discuss additions to the WVU football coaching staff and could there be a significant rule change that affects redshirt eligibility? We'll get into all of that and more on this edition of ITG.
Caution, this podcast contains bad jokes, optimism, and a healthy disdain for Pat Narduzzi. Watching it may increase your actual knowledge of actual football.
ITG.
All the pieces are in place for us to have a chance to win it all.
And we're the three best friends that anybody could have.
There's Owen Schmitt in the building.
Like a runaway beer truck down the sidelines.
Towards the end, he in there, Jed Drenning.
I'm not much of an athlete.
The thing that's non-negotiable is playing hard and playing tough.
And Wesley, Valen, Uhler. You are in the gun.
Once you enter this family, there's no getting out.
In the Gun, episode 318 of your new favorite WVU football podcast. I am Wes Uhler, the host here, alongside the signal caller, Jed Drenning, and thank you for being with us on this edition of ITG. As always, before we get started here, we like to thank the people that make this possible, support those who support us, and we have got a village certainly behind us. Toothman Ford, the good people there, JR and everybody at Team Toothman. We all know cars cost less in Grafton. They do yeoman's work for WVU in the NIL department. A big shout out to everybody there at Team Toothman. A thank you to Fortis, our friend Rick Lewis. We all know for roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed, you got to visit fortis.us.com. Johnston Equipment, Emily, Bryce, everybody there at Johnston Equipment. We are becoming friends here on the show and friends in real life, and it's been a lot of fun over the last few months. Make sure you're checking Johnston Equipment out, Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan. You can also always visit them online. That's Johnston with a T, johnstoneq.com. And, of course, the Book Exchange, the Morgantown staple. Get all your WVU gear and apparel at the Book Exchange. Family owned and operated for over 90 years. Shop there, 2 locations, downtown and, of course, on Evansdale, right there on Patterson Drive. Or you can always shop online at bookexchangewv.com. And, Jed, let's jump right into it here, partner, because it sounds like, or doesn't sound like, I know it's the case, we have some staff changes, some staff additions here to the WVU football program. A lot of talk about recruiting and transfer portal and that kind of stuff, rightfully so this time of year. But we also, of course, have some moving and shaking on the coaching staff as well.
We do. One of the things that played out, Wes, at the end of last season, right before the holidays, a couple things. You had the Bandit Room, which was coached by longtime West Virginia defensive assistant, former defensive coordinator, coaching legend at this point, Jeff Castile. Well, Jeff's son, Jake Castile, was his understudy at the Bandit position. Well, Glenville State, my alma mater, the one and only, the Fighting Pioneers, were fortunate enough to avail themselves of the services of one Jake Castile as their new head coach. He's going to do great things down there. I'm convinced of it. I know he will. So Jeff decided he was already retired once. He decided to go ahead and re-retire. So as he told me recently, he said, Jed, I'm back to forgetting what day of the week it is. So good for you, Mr. Castile. Now you can, up on the hill in Morgantown above the stadium, keep an eye on your neighbor, Tony Caridi.
That's right.
So, congratulations to the Castile. But that shook some things open. So it's reached a point where if you have an opening for a Rich Rodriguez coach staff, it's going to be somewhat coveted. People recognize you can be attached to some success. So there was some demand when this opening hit the coaching circles, and a number of relatively grueling interviews were conducted. And out of that mix was selected the most talented and impressive of the lot of a very impressive group. And that was one Larry Knight. Now, for those of you not familiar with the name who are outside of coaching circles, he's considered a young up-and-comer on the defensive side of the football. A lot of people think that he's not that far from being a defensive coordinator in his own right and maybe one day a head coach. He has that kind of pedigree, that kind of skill set, that kind of personality. But more importantly, between the lines, that kind of ability to coach his guys up. And so if you look recently, he's pretty established for a guy his age. He's bounced around a lot of jobs, working his way up. But most recently, he was at Arkansas State with former West Virginia assistant Butch Jones. And at Arkansas State, he was coaching their defensive ends. And when you look at what played out at Arkansas State last year under his tutelage, first of all, the defense at large led the Sun Belt with 39 sacks. They were a very high pressure oriented defense. So impressive for the Red Wolves defense in general. But more specifically, when you look at his guys, 18 of those 39 sacks came from his defensive ends and edge defenders. And Wes, here's an impressive number. They had 108 quarterback pressures collectively come from that group. So he knows how to coach technique. He knows how to coach get off. He knows how to get some production out of his guys. So I think it's terribly exciting when you look at a guy who he's bounced through some internships. He's had great opportunities with NFL internships with the Packers for a year, with the Falcons for a year. Years ago, spent a couple years coaching the Temple defensive line before moving up to coach the Georgia Tech offensive line. So he's worked his way up the old school way, but the production that his coaching has recently yielded in his position group, we've talked about and we'll talk about in the next episode about some of the production that we anticipate coming from those edge rushers that we acquired in the portal and some of the kids that we got in recruiting class. And to think that he's going to be able to step in and what he might be able to do with those guys, I think it's terribly exciting. And I think Larry Knight is a tremendous addition. And that's one of two additions that we're going to talk about. But yeah, I was really excited. Once you pop the hood and do a deep dive on what he's all about and his pedigree, you're going to walk away impressed. So great addition to the staff. But once again, congratulations, Mr. Castillo. You earned retirement number 2, and congratulations to Jake Castillo. You're going to do great things at Glenville State.
I love it. And we have a special spot in our heart here. This is obviously a WVU football podcast, but I think we've got a couple special spots in our heart here too, Jed. Of course, University of Wisconsin, River Falls, where Big O got his start, Division III national champs a couple weeks ago, and I think Glenville State being another one of those. So yeah, all the best. All the best to Jake Castile. And, Jed, from one family name that WVU fans all know in the Castiles to another in the Trickets as we continue to talk about these staff additions. You see what I did there?
Love it. That's a professional segue from a professional man. I'd expect no less. But I tell you this, I'm tickled pink. And I'm really excited how I found out. I didn't know this was unfolding. And so I recently was in the building, and one of my stops when I'm hitting the circuit, I got to stop in and see Travis, right? I went over and I had to catch up with Rick because I haven't caught up with Rick since he was back in town. So Coach Trickett and I both coached Trickett and I caught up. But when I wanted to see Travis, I barged into his office, and it was shell shock. Sitting at his desk in front of him, turned around, was his brother Chance Trickett, and he's dressed all in WVU garb. And I'm like, what's going on here?
Wait a second.
And he had a big smile on his face. And I was like, I don't know what's happening, but I like the looks of it. I'll say that now. What's happening here? So wouldn't you know it? But the Trickets, the brain trust of Chance and Trav, were putting together different recruiting areas in the state of Florida. I mean, few people know Florida like the Trickets. Trust me. I mean, you do not want to recruit against the Trickett family in the state of Florida. You don't. So they were carving that up to be most effective. But what's happened is Chance Trickett, who has been in my life since, he was knee high to a grasshopper.
I knew
like
you were
going to
say
kids.
that.
Yeah. And it's just so funny that remembering seeing these kids bounced around as little ones at Glenville State back in the late 90s. And here they are doing great things, all three of them. But he has been assigned the role of director of player evaluation for West Virginia. And you talk about something that is absolutely befitting Chance Trickett's skill set. Absolutely. I mean, consider his background and the way that he came up through this. Yeah. Now, Rick Trickett likes to say, I never call in favors for my kids. If they get it, they earn it. And that holds true with all three of them. And when you look at the grind that Chance Trickett has put in, it's much like Clint, it's much like Travis. They've done it their own way, and it's been a tough road to hoe at times. So what I like about it is the one consistent piece to all these jobs that we're going to talk about, and it's really only a handful, but it's on the personnel side or the recruiting side. So that's his background. That's the world in which he resides, and he knows it and knows it well. But he spent a couple years at Florida State when he was a young pup as a recruiting assistant. Moved on to Louisiana Tech, where he was their director of football recruiting. Now jumped from there into a role with the Los Angeles Rams. And that's where he's been for the better part of the last decade, doing great things with the Rams, doing great things with the Rams.
Super Bowl champion, right? If I remember correctly.
Super Bowl champion, correct? Yes. And he's been a national scout that did help earn that ring. And it's funny when you get into the modern game and you stop and consider how dynamic it is and how quickly changing it is. It's just the nature in which they do things from a scouting and even forward scouting standpoint has changed so much, so fast. You're in that world too, Wes. You see it.
It looks more and more. I mean, looks more and more like the NFL every year.
It is. It is. I mean, especially with the NIL fold over in the crossover roster management. You have a salary
management,
to manage,
all that stuff.
I mean, all these things. It's less than of a Venn diagram and more of a complete circle than it's ever been, right? But when you consider some of the things that Chance was doing in that role with the Rams, and read his bio, it's terribly impressive. Film analytics, he verified measurables and psychological and cognitive components to support draft board construction. That's a big part of draft day. I mean, those war rooms, yes, a lot of it's predicated on film study, metrics, and what can be measured, but a lot of it also is the psych side, the cognitive side. You don't want to invest that kind of money in these projects and these kids and these players at the NFL level, even. And make a miscalculation from that side. So he's been very involved in that, and that's part of what scouts do as well. He provided or also produced, and part of this I'm reading from Monty's press release, in-depth positional value assessments and roster impact reports for multi-year draft planning. They have to strategize multiple years out to recognize what is and isn't going to happen. Contract strategy plays into that. Integrated advanced scouting technology to enhance how accurate you can be in forecasting what a player might look like in 1, 2, 3, 4 years. So that's what he's been involved in. So now bring him into this world where he's going to be tasked with evaluating talent on so many levels. I mean, I haven't sat down and discussed this with the staff exactly what the soup to nuts job description will be for Chance, but I'll promise you he's going to have his fingers on all things personnel, whether that's high school recruiting, whether that's the portal evaluations, whether that's forward scouting for the teams you're preparing to play. You now have his skill set, which is vast, at your disposal for any of those things you might need. And he hasn't just been a scout going through the motions and filling that role for a decade. As you talked about, this is an organization that won a championship with him being part of it. And this is really impressive, too. When you stop and consider last year, as a member of the Rams scouting department, he was awarded the Bart List Award. Now, you probably don't know what that means if you're outside the NFL or outside scouting circles. Danton Bardo was a linebacker from Memphis and a longtime Rams scout, and he died during COVID. And he was just a very well-respected guy in those circles. So this award was named after him. And the best thing about it is it's peer voted. Mm-hmm. In other words, your competitors and those you work with are deciding who wins this. To me, I always say this, there is no greater award than one that is peer voted. Well, Chance Trickett won this award last year. So he stood out as a scout with the Rams. So he's a special guy with a special talent, much like Larry Knight. I think these are two tremendous additions to the West Virginia coaching staff for a host of different reasons. I mean, from a schematic and production standpoint, I'm terribly excited with what we stand to gain from Larry Knight, with what he's going to do with those kids and the possibilities in his room. And with Chance, it's just so far across the line in terms of the things you might see his fingerprints on. I'm excited about the program at large from a personnel standpoint. It's a group effort in there. I mean, nothing's going to happen without Rich being involved in a very heavy way as well, obviously. That's one of the things that makes Rich different from a personnel standpoint. He's very hands-on when it comes to it. There's a certain type of guy that he's after. But the more people with this type of background and this type of pedigree that you can have around the table when you're discussing these things, it's just worth its weight in gold bullion.
Jed, I think especially, you obviously can paint the Trickett picture better than anybody. And I just want to add from the LA Rams side, as you kind of touched on there, that's a franchise that from Jared Goff until when they drafted Jared Goff, all the way back, think about how long that was ago in 2016, until 2024, so not this past draft, but the one before, did not have a first-round pick. They went 9 years, that organization, without a first-round pick. And when you still look at the talent they drafted, it's crazy impressive. They went a lot of those years. They went a lot of those years without a second and sometimes a third-round pick too.
I forgot that, Wes. That's a great point. You are digging so deep.
It's one of the things. The Rams are probably the NFL organization that I admire most if you go over this past 9-10 year period, because they've had success in so many different ways. They've done it through free agency. They've done it through trades. They've done it through the draft. But like back end of day 2 and day 3 drafting, where they've been
their franchise quarterback,
where they've
guys take them to the Super Bowl,
Now, Jed, keep that in mind. No first round pick, and a lot of these years, no second round pick either. And they still drafted guys like, I don't know, Cooper Kupp, who did the Triple Crown a few years ago. Gerald Everett, very good tight end. John Franklin Myers in the 4th round. He's got like 40 sacks in his NFL career. Taylor Rapp, who's a very good safety. David Long, not the West Virginia David Long, and the other one out of Michigan, good defensive back. I mean, like Cam Akers, Van Jefferson, Terrell Burgess, all these guys, Tutu Atwell, Ernest Jones, Kobe Durant, Kyron Williams in the 5th round, Byron Young, Kobe Turner. I mean, Puka Nacua in the 6th round, who's going to be named Offensive Player of the Year here, and maybe Jackson Smith and Jigba, one of those two in the next couple of weeks. They drafted Braden Fisk in the 2nd round. He's outstanding. I mean, it's been crazy. Kobe Turner, 3rd round draft pick. He's one of the best interior defensive linemen in the National Football League. It's like every year they were finding guys in the 3rd and 5th and 6th round that are like some of those guys I just named. Cooper Kupp certainly going to go to the Hall of Fame, like Super Bowl champions, Super Bowl MVPs, offensive players of the year. And they've done all that picking, almost never inside the top 50. Like it's very, very impressive.
In other words, he was an instrumental part, I would argue, of an organization that broadly did a better job of evaluating talent than maybe anybody in the NFL over the stretch of the last decade, which almost coincides. I'm not saying it's all because of him. I'm just saying that coincides with his run with that organization.
It's a good place to be and to be learning.
The knowledge that he has soaked up along the way, that now West Virginia can avail themselves of those services. And it's
and Jed,
by the way, his name's Trickett. That's what I always say about these Trickett kids. It's like, by the way, their name's Trickett. It's not. You don't lead with that. It's
to bring it full circle too. Let's be honest. We're West Virginia University. All right. We're not a bunch of bums, but we're not Ohio State or Texas or Michigan. We're not picking from the 1st round 5-star draft picks too often. We're going to that next wave and that next wave, looking for the guys that have been passed over and undervalued by everybody else, much like the Rams have been doing for the past decade. So yeah, I think it's a lot to be excited about.
I will. The last thing I'll say on this is, again, when I was in there and I saw Chance and I was talking to Trav and catching up with those guys and catching up with Rick was great. It's been a while. It's been a minute since I saw Rick, and to have him stand up and give me a big old bear hug, start mumbling at me and give me that old raspy 5 o'clock. I'll say this, there's a good vibe in the building. There really is a very good vibe inside that building. When you're in there going about your business, making your stops. There's something going on there. There's something going on there.
No, I'm looking over their last 8 or 9 years in the draft. It's just absolutely ridiculous. It's just absolutely
I've forgotten how many high picks they lost until you pointed that out. I forgot that. Yeah.
I mean, they've drafted like 6 or 7 guys that all have at least 15 or more sacks in their NFL career, all in the 4th and 5th and 6th round. They've drafted superstars in Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams and like a really good guy in Tutu Atwell, way later in the drafts. That's exciting. That's the type of anyone could tell you the 5 stars are really good football. Anyone could tell you that Chris Henry Jr. can play football. Okay. I mean, you don't have to have much of a background to that. But to find the Pukas and the Tutu Atwells, that's exactly what the doctor ordered in Morgantown. Jed, before we go to break real quick, we did just want to do a quick little around campus update here. WVU men's basketball team. You know what, Jed? Honestly, I think they've kind of done what they should do so far. They played 2 like bona fide, legit national contenders on the road in Iowa State and Houston, and they lost lopsidedly, but they came back home against a Cincinnati team that they should beat, and they did, and against a Kansas team that they were only a slight underdog against, and we did what Mountaineers do, death taxes, and beating the Kansas Jayhawks at the Coliseum. They're right where they need to be. 2-2 in conference play. Obviously, if they can hang around 500, they're going to have a chance to make the tournament. When you go on the road against these Houstons and Arizona States, and they got to go to Iowa States, and they got to go to Arizona next week, which is the number 1 team in the country. Those aren't the ones you need to win. I mean, that's just not where we're at as a program right now. But when Cincinnati comes to the Coliseum
and catch them on an off night, that you're playing with house money. Because
exactly right.
To your point, that's not what you're building your template for success this season around, is winning those games against those teams and those venues. That's not the plan, right?
That's not the plan.
You want to win every game, but
take care of business against the teams that are, in that middle tier of the Big 12, just like you. Hold serve at home, and you might have a chance to play some important games down the stretch.
A lot of people are hating on Kansas after we beat them. Oh, well, they lost to UCF. That's not a very good Kansas. Look what they did to Iowa State 5 minutes later. So don't give me that. Kansas is Kansas, all right? But I shot a tweet out asking people's response to this, and it got a lot of action. It was a fun conversation with Mountaineer fans. I simply asked, and there's a couple critical parts to the question. So often Bill Self has come here. He's always favored. Sometimes he's heavily favored, but look how often he goes home with the L. So I had to ask myself, these are all disappointing losses for Kansas. They expect to win games where they're favored. If you look at it historically, is there a certain venue? I don't care if in the Big 12, in the Big East, whatever it might be. I don't care if it's basketball. I don't care if it's football. That West Virginia consistently went into as a favorite. So don't tell me Penn State or something. Of course, we didn't expect to win going to Penn State. It always worried you. But we were always heavy underdogs. But is there a venue that we went to as a favorite that you're always like, oh, boy, I don't like it? It's like Dowdy Ficklin Stadium at East Carolina in football just seemed to be – people will talk about South Florida.
I was going to say Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, yeah.
Yeah. But, and that's fair. Some of those games we lost, even sometimes like East Carolina, we escaped with a couple wins.
What about Lubbock? What about Lubbock?
That was brought up in the comments. I'm telling you, fans put those in the comments here on the show because it started a great conversation. There were a lot of tremendous comments on Twitter with fans responding with different even some people at the Carrier Dome. I thought, you know what? That's a good point. There were times that we had a stretch of being favored up there. You could argue in both sports. And I even think to like our early days in the Big 12, I've said this many times here and elsewhere, Jack Trice Stadium.
That's a good one.
I don't like that place. I mean, even when we went in as a heavy favorite, they gave us more than we expected. Like, even if it was close at halftime and we separated after that, it was always a different flow of a game than you expected. And then they turned the corner. Matt Campbell became a different program. We haven't been favored here in a while. But so what are your thoughts? Basketball, football, whatever it might be. Is there a particular venue in recent or not so recent history that we were consistently favored, that you're like, I don't like how this feels. They always give us trouble down there, even if we survive and win. So put some thought into it. Give us some comments. That's a great way to get some discussion going in the comment section.
Jed, last thing before we go to break. Maybe this isn't quite around campus. Maybe this is more like around the alumni center. Maybe we can make that a new off-season segment here. We got around campus, so we got around the alumni center. Just real quick, wanted to read this quote that Aaron Rodgers had to say about Zach Frazier.
Love it.
And from the 4-time MVP, one of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of the National Football League. And I quote, 54, that's Zach Frazier's number for those that don't really follow the NFL or the Steelers that much. Aaron Rodgers said 54 is as consistent as they come in this league. He's got a bright future. He's a phenomenal player. He's got a real steady way about him to go the whole season, not have any snap issues, to not do a whole lot, to not have to do a whole lot back there protection-wise. When I've done that most of my career, he's an exceptional player. If the team was smart, they'd slap a deal on him pretty quickly because he's going to be 10-plus years in the league and one of the best to do it, in my opinion. That's his trajectory, end quote. Hey, a lot of people have been singing Zach Frazier's praises, rightfully so, Jed, but when it's a guy who's going to walk into Canton and forever be known as an all-time great signal caller, that's pretty stinking cool to hear him. He could have just said, yeah, I loved working with Zach this year. He's a great kid. He's going to be really good. But for him to go into that much detail and really give an answer there, you could tell he means it. And I don't think at this point in his career, Aaron Rodgers says much that he doesn't mean. He's kind of got no filter in that regard. He'll shoot it to you straight, right? Pretty awesome compliment for our guy as he wraps up his second year in the NFL.
It was far beyond an informal platitude. Now, you're too young to remember this, way too young, Wes, but when I was a kid, some of the listeners will remember, some of the viewers will remember, there was a series of commercials that were promoting E.F. Hutton, a brokerage firm, okay, and they said, when E.F. Hutton speaks, people listen. And as soon as you heard the words E.F. Hutton, everybody fell silent. That's kind of Aaron Rodgers when it comes to these types of things. And to heap that type of praise, deserved praise, on Zach Frazier. Now, I have to admit, as soon as I saw the tweet, or as soon as I saw the post on X, whatever you want to call it, shot it right to Ray Frazier. All these things I sent straight to Zach's dad, Ray Frazier, both friends of the show, by the way. And I texted, I think, in the group thread the other day. I bumped into Ray in Fairmont. And, of course, I had to call him right afterwards because we couldn't stick around right there. We ended up on the phone for 45 minutes. It's just, he's a great football mind. Love picking his mind. And he's terribly excited for Zach. I mean, we all are. It's Zach is a special guy, special Mountaineer. And he's going to be a special player in the NFL for a long time. So I agree. Put pen to paper and take care of that. Hand that guy's bag. He needs a big one.
Nope, without a doubt. And going to be a lot of fun to watch him continue as he's certainly just getting started. We are just getting started. Got to get to our commercial break here. But on the other side, could we have a significant rule change coming that will impact redshirt eligibility? And could we once again in September be running into some familiar opposition? Could one of the more notable guys that we've hated in the history of this ITG podcast be back on the docket for the Mountaineers in 2026? We'll talk about all that and more on the other side. You are in the gun.
For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
You're listening to Mountaineer Football Talk.
ITG. When the sun's just rising and the work won't wait, you need the equipment that works just as hard as you do. Johnson Equipment delivers power, performance, and reliability day in, day out. Whether you're plowing fields, hauling loads, or planting the future, our tractors are built to take it and then some. Strong, reliable, ready.
Low-rate financing available on select Coyote models.
Johnson Equipment, farming made easy.
Get all your Mountaineer gear in WVU apparel at the Book Exchange.
They're the locally owned and operated retailer with more than 90 years of selling everything you need for game day and everything else you need to show you're the ultimate WVU fan. Shop at their 2 locations at downtown Morgantown or Evansdale on Pattison Drive, or online at bookexchangewv.com.
When shopping online at bookexchangewv.com, be sure to enter code INTHEGUN20 at checkout for an awesome savings of 20%. That's right, 20%.
Back in the gun here as we roll along, and Jed, it is time to talk about a potential rule change. This might be something that flies under the radar a little bit, but I think it's pretty significant in this ever-changing landscape of college football. That seems to be the theme in the 4 years that we've done this show now. 3 years? 3 years that we've 4 years that we've done this show now.
Well,
yeah.
5, yeah.
Seems to be ever changing. If you had to write a one-word elevator pitch for what this show has talked about the most in the last 4 years, it's probably ever-changing landscape of college football. But one that might not grab the headlines like transfer portal and conference realignment and NIL and that kind of stuff. But we could have a pretty significant change to redshirt eligibility in college football.
You could, and what's always interesting, or often interesting, behind these conversations is the why, and that's what I really want to get to. But to set the table and paint the picture for folks as to what's going on, college football FBS coaches voted unanimously in favor of this rule. That doesn't mean it's going to immediately be adopted. Now it has to go before a committee and be approved. Right now it's just a recommendation, and if it is approved, I get the sense it won't take effect until the 2027 season. But here's what's playing out. A handful of years ago, all these things played out, and the changes were made, and they said, okay, the red shirt rule, you can now play in 4 games by hook or by crook. You're still allowed to get your red shirt. And meanwhile, the coaches have there's been this growing sense that they want to move to, why don't we just remove the nonsense and go 5 years to play 5? Simplify it. That's what the coaches want, right?
Yep.
I mean, the coaches have been pretty clear on what they want from their side. But there's been resistance to that. It makes too much sense, and there's been pushback and litigation, of course, and so that hasn't happened. So the coaches brought this to vote and said, how about instead of 4 games, we say a kid's allowed to play in as many as 9 games, right? And they can still redshirt. And your knee-jerk reaction might be, why? Why even? What are you talking about? Why go to 9 games instead of 4? Okay, well, here comes the why. This is part of the why. This is a deeper discussion. That's the beauty of the offseason. We have the entire offseason to cover these types of things. But what happened when the 4-game rule was instituted? What happened? Tell me, Wes. It was like week 5 immediately
Shut
became
them down.
National Self-Redshirt Day. Week 5, you knew it was coming. Every team in America had kids shutting it down, saying, all right, I played my 4 games. I'm out. Whether you like it or not, I'm self-redshirting to retain my eligibility. I'm no longer part of this football team. So now, at least if you tinker with the numbers, you got to do something to affect change. That's not going to be something that saves this thing or fixes this thing or repairs it overnight. You're working towards a better resolution than saying 4 games and you're out. Okay, so if you increase it to 9 games, that's somewhere in the middle of the 5 years to play 5 and the 4 games, and you can still redshirt. That's somewhere between those two things. So that's kind of how I view this. But that's the larger discussion. And there's so many pieces of litigation right now, including you got a quarterback who just played in the semifinals for Ole Miss, who's pushing for an extra year, and he's trying to say that, look, my Division II year shouldn't have counted. This shouldn't have counted. And that all these things are going to be settled, unfortunately, in the courts. But there's a lot of litigation and battles that have to be determined and have yet to be determined. And that's where we find ourselves with that. But meanwhile, the coaches have spoken, saying, look, we at least got to try and make some kind of change. This 4-game thing, we saw where that went, and it was disastrous. It did not on any level serve the purpose or honor the spirit of what that rule was supposed to do, right? It was just week 5, National Self-Shutdown Day. Yep. So will this impact change? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. That doesn't mean they have to play in 9 games. It means they can. Maybe they'll still shut down, or maybe they'll be less inclined to shut down by the time they do. If you played 9 games and you're getting ready to play in 10, I guess you at least kind of sort of know what your team's about. And if you have a chance to make a significant run against significant competition, that still matters to some kids for no other reason than they see scouts recognize they like to
Sure.
see you against the best teams. Okay.
Sure.
And if you want to play at the NFL and improve your draft stock, and let's say you're sitting there at 8-1 after 9 games, and you're positioned to get in the playoffs with X seed and play top tier teams, maybe you'll think it through and say, hey, this might be my best shot for a season. Do I really want to bail out and come back next year when there's no guarantee I'll be back in this same spot playing for an 8-1 team? I don't know the impact it'll have. I don't have the crystal ball. Neither do the coaches. They just recognize that, look, the way it is right now with that particular dimension of the game, there's a million parts of the game that need addressed and need fixed. But this is one very specific one that hasn't worked out at all, and they're trying to do at least something about it. So, A for effort. There's at least evidence of effort. Now, the committee should approve it. I think they will. There's no guarantee of that, but I think they will, and it would take effect, Wes, 2027 again. That's the impression I get.
Yeah, something's going to happen in this regard because there's so much gray area, I think is probably the best way to put it. You know, there's so much, well, you know, Diego Pavia, right, gets his JUCO years waived for more eligibility, but Trinidad Chambliss doesn't for his D2 years, you know, and I understand there's differences between D2 and JUCO, but in the spirit of the thing, isn't it kind of a similar type conversation? So just a lot of gray area that will continue to change and evolve. And I think you're right. I think this is probably the next step in it. I'm with you. I would just like to see everybody gets 5 years of eligibility. Forget the red shirts, forget all this. You get 5 years. You could play college sports for 5 years. If you're healthy and dressed for all 5, great. If you don't play your freshman year, tough luck. If you pick up an injury your third year, I don't know. I know we're gonna later this week talk about the college football playoff and all that stuff. And I'm kind of boomer when I'm like, bring us back to the BCS. I don't need all this stuff, right? Just make it easy. You get 5 years. That's it. 5 years to play as much as you want or as little as you can, as much as you can, as little as you can in those 5 years. But I think this is probably obviously the likely next step. And my idea is probably pie in the sky.
I don't know about pie in the sky because there is an impetus behind it. The coaches have to win over some of the decision makers with their logic for this. And this is something, I mean, Jimbo Fisher was clamoring for this 10 years ago, right? The 5 years to play 5.
That's true.
And there's nothing novel to it. It makes sense and it's yet to happen. And look, I'm not even going to say, look, it's 5 years to play 5, and there are absolutely no exceptions because courts don't like that kind of language, right? If in fact some guy breaks his leg and halfway, well, yeah, you can petition, and maybe under certain special circumstances, maybe you get if there's a very special medical need. But what you don't want is to incentivize kids to bail out from their team so they can try and transfer to another team.
Agreed.
Don't incentivize that. If you want to transfer the next year, fine. You shouldn't have to bail out after 4 games to try and do it. You should be able to play through and say, I got 5 years to play 5. There's no reason to bail out halfway through the season, 4 games into the season, 9 games into the season. Ultimately, that's where we need to land some form, some version of that. But this is college football. It's reactionary by nature. You're talking about a sport that took a century, more than a century, to decide, hey, you know what? I think a good idea was to ensure that number 1 plays number 2 at the end of the year to determine a champion. It took them 100 years to get to that point. Okay. So now we live in this world where things happen so quickly as opposed to that. I don't know. But it's an interesting conversation. The coaches are hoping for change, at least some element of change. That's not the full change they want, but it's something. We'll see if, in fact, that plays out. And if so, what difference that will make. Because I remember having these conversations about the impact the 4 games would have and the strategy and it's the unintended consequences to get you. And the self-red shirt in week 5 across the entire country every year, that was the unintended consequence. So here we are.
Here we are indeed. And as we wrap this thing up, Jed, speaking of the ever-changing landscape of college football, of course, the transfer portal may be chief most amongst that conversation. And we could be seeing a familiar face, a familiar foe, Eli Holstein, once again in 2026. Jed, that candy ass, who I called him when he got planted, what was it, 6 or 7 or 8 times on the field at Mountaineer turf, and then knocked out the popcorn vendor with that pass into the stands that he sailed on 4th down and overtime.
He threw that to Tony and Dwight on 4th down. Yeah,
he sure did. Eli Holstein has committed to Virginia, UVA, Wahoo Wah, of course, who the Mountaineers will face down in Charlotte in what I believe will be week 3, I want to say. I don't know if that's exactly been determined
September
yet.
19th.
September 19th. Okay, there you go. So it has been determined. I would normally I'd just say, hey, bring it on. Let's go. Let's roll. But this is extra interesting because Bo Pribula, who was at Pribula, however he pronounces his last name, I've heard it a few different ways, but he started his career at Penn State and then spent last year at Missouri. He was Missouri's starting quarterback last year. He transferred to Virginia about a week ago. So I don't know if this signifies that maybe with Pribula's contract, the ink wasn't dried and he's going to end up going somewhere else. I saw that suggested by some people on social media because everyone was kind of like, why would Eli Holstein want to transfer somewhere to go into a quarterback competition? Wouldn't he want to go somewhere where he's the guy? But regardless, it looks like old Eli could be back on the menu in 2026.
It would make more sense to me if it came the other way. If Holstein committed first and then Pribula committed second, that would make more sense to me. But the fact that he did it after this, but it almost has Keaton Slovis vibes to it. Like, remember when we so desperately wanted to face Keaton Slovis after he talked that trash at Pitt and he was supposed to start for BYU, and it didn't happen.
We
never got that moment. So this is like our second chance for a Keaton Slovis moment, our second chance for another run at Eli Holstein. And it's so funny that when you look at the nature in which this conversation surrounding Eli Holstein has changed. I mean, it was 5 minutes ago that I was hearing he's making more money in Pittsburgh than Paul Skeens for the Pirates. And from that to this, right? So
it's fast.
But let's start with Virginia. This is a very intriguing and impactful and meaningful non-league game. That's going to be. I don't know if you've been to one of these neutral site venues.
I have. I went to the last one against Tennessee in Charlotte in 2018. I was there.
Was that not incredible?
It was
Mountaineer
awesome.
fans turn out for these things. In Atlanta and Charlotte, they turn out for these things. And this is the type of game I would expect UVA to turn out for too, because they're kind of at an apex right now. They're running at a high they haven't been at in a long time under head coach Tony Elliott. They're fresh off an 11-win season and a bowl win over a ranked SEC team. They beat Mizzou. So there's a lot of buzz, and they've activated some dollars from that booster side that don't often come out of the coffers for UVA Cavalier football, right? That's often an afterthought in Charlottesville is Cavalier football, but that's not the case with Tony Elliott. They're winning some games. They're a little excited about the program, and so they want to keep this thing humming. So what's played out, a central part of their success last year was another name West Virginia fans will be familiar with, and that was quarterback Chandler Morris, who, of course, transferred, from a couple years previous, TCU, who faced us when we knocked him out down there in that game with the blocked field goals, and I thought that was a heck of a game. I knocked him out metaphorically. He played a heck of a game against us. I thought he was a good player, and he was a good player for them last year. Terribly productive, a big part of what they did. But not only did they lose him, he moves on, but his backup was Daniel Kalen, who was a Nebraska transfer, who's now transferring back to Nebraska.
Yep.
So they're losing their top two quarterbacks. So it makes sense on some level to say, hey, we need two guys that can play. What's the old Mike Tomlin thing? One dog, two dogs, one bone. Well, that's what this is going to amount to. But here's the funny thing about Pribula. When you look at what Bo did when he transferred to Missouri, there was a lot of buzz around that. Remember that hot start they got off to? They were 5-0, and he was playing lights out. We kind of came back down to earth after that, got knocked around and nicked up and missed some time. Wes, he only ended the year 11 touchdowns against 9 picks. He ran for 6 touchdowns. His numbers in production wasn't really blowing your skirt up in Columbia by the end of the season. So I don't think he reached his talent ceiling. I really don't. He's a legitimate dual threat guy. So UVA had to be happy to get him. And Eli Holstein, obviously, we've seen the damage he can do. I mean, we faced him a couple times. They didn't make the switch until after the West Virginia game. But it's an interesting dynamic. Again, UVA is very serious about what's playing out. They want to try and build on that, and they don't want that to be an outlier or a one-off. They're trying to repair their quarterback situation. Even when you look at running back, they lost their running back, Jamari Taylor. He declared for the NFL draft. Harrison Whaley's eligibility expired, so they replaced those with some guys that they're really excited about. A kid from Tennessee and a kid from Middle Tennessee. They got some talent returning at the tight end position, so they're kind of excited where their offense potentially could be. So this could, and maybe by the time this thing airs, you're right, Wes. Maybe some of the buzz on Twitter or on X is right, and he backed out and it didn't even happen, and he's going somewhere else. And we're wasting 10 minutes of our lives talking about this. But that's the nature of the offseason. Either way, it's a terribly intriguing Week 3 matchup with West Virginia facing the Cavs. And, of course, we'll talk about this a lot in the offseason, but one thing still sticks in my craw about the last time we faced the Cavs. Don't get me started on that band. But that UVA band. But anyway, everybody knows the story if you were there. It's been now 20-some plus years. I don't give up grudges.
You're harkening back. I thought I held grudges for a long time.
Yeah, it was Avon Coburn Day. But so anyway, Heath Miller played in that game so long ago
Yes, he did.
So at any rate, yeah, it's an interesting byline to a game that's going to have a lot of interesting bylines. That game is going to be there's going to be a ton of Mountaineer fans in Charlotte for that thing. It really is.
Buddy.
It's going to set up to be a pretty interesting matchup for both sides.
I am hoping my day job, my NFL duties allow me to somehow finagle a way to get there. I'm not overly optimistic, but there's Thursday night football and Monday night football and all these other things that could happen. Crazier things have happened, so we'll see. I would love to return to Charlotte for another one of those great neutral site games. Going to be a lot of fun, and like you said, there'll already be a lot of subplots to West Virginia versus Virginia, but especially if Eli Holstein is under center for the Cavaliers. Jed, that'll do it for this edition of ITG. Good stuff. Wanted to let all the people know we will be dropping another episode this week. We'll have some more on the transfer portal and some more on the college football playoff not too long. So, subscribe, as we always encourage you to do. Whether if you're on YouTube, give us a like and a subscribe. If you're listening on your favorite podcast platforms, make sure you're following and subscribed there as well. And we appreciate you for spreading the good word about your new favorite WVU football podcast. So for the producer, co-host, Mr. Do-It-All, Schuyler Callihan, the runaway barbecue and sharp-dressed beer truck, Big O, and the signal caller, Jed Drenning, I'm Wes Uhler. The one thing we ask of you is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. Take care, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. You are in the gun.
ITG.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback,
be sure to follow us on X at In the Gun Podcast.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
This mission is over. It's over.